So, welcome to the Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm the Reverend Kendra Grams Pastor at First Presbyterian Church here in Hudson, Wisconsin. And today I am blessed to gather with several of my colleagues from the greater Hudson community to continue discussions about how local faith communities have been responding to the public health and economic crisis caused by the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. And as we are now in the middle of December, to also have a little bit of conversation about how we move through this time with intention, knowing it is very different than any holiday seasons we have past experienced. So today, for our first conversation, I'm blessed to be joined by Pastor John Lestock of Bethel Lutheran here in Hudson, Father John Gerritts of St. Patrick's Parish here in Hudson, and the Reverend Don Jeffers Ramstad of Hudson United Methodist Church. So to kick it off, wanted to just name that we have all been adapting so much during these times. And one of the things that I know I have discovered is all of that adaptation and change reveals and forces you to focus on what you value most. So I wondered if we could, as colleagues, reflect on what this time has revealed about our faith communities and their deeply held values and how you are living into those during that time. So Don, could we begin with you? What has been revealed about Hudson United Methodist in terms of your core values during this time, and how are you continuing to live into those?
Well, thank you for asking, Kendra. I appreciate the question. I think the core values we have that anyone who drives by our church can see is to embrace the United Methodist mission to be people with open minds, open hearts, and open doors. And then to figure out what that means to be able to take our worship to YouTube and the River Channel, and what it means to adapt our prayer practices to using Zoom so they can stay within our church community has been interesting. There's also the core value of feeding the hungry, and our Wednesday bread giveaway. They adapted immediately last March to being curbside as an essential service, and I couldn't be more proud of them. And they continue to do that as this unfolds. And so those core values are what I'm really appreciative in my local church.
Wonderful. Yeah, I know many of us share some of those great core values. Father John, what about you and St. Patrick's? What has been revealed or reinforced, and how do you continue to live into your core values during this time?
Yeah, so one of certainly our core values or most important elements of our faith is the Eucharist. And so back in March when we shut down for public worship, it was really a struggle for us as a parish and for many of our members in not being able to receive the Eucharist on a regular basis. We talked about being able to receive what we call a spiritual communion, in that if we have the desire to receive the Eucharist, that we can receive the grace, the blessings of the Eucharist in a spiritual manner. And this is a teaching that goes back really to the very early days of the church, but it certainly is not the same as receiving for us the body, the blood of Christ in a physical way. And so when we were able to resume some public worship here, that was really significant. And then even finding some ways that we could get communion to some of the care facilities, and just seeing the people who hadn't received the Eucharist in a physical way for a couple of months, so many of just tears in their eyes at their longing to receive the Eucharist, and just feeling the grace, the blessing when they were finally able to receive the Eucharist. Like all of us, we've certainly have found ways to live stream and to record videos of our celebrations, of our services. But for us, it is trying to find that balance between being open publicly so people can receive the Eucharist, but at the same time too ministering to those who should be at home and who need to take even greater precautions and stay at home. And so it's finding that balance between trying to find ways to minister to both communities, sometimes feeling almost like we have two parishes, but yet making sure that we do emphasize the unity between those who are in church physically and those who are at home. And then, as Pastor Dawn said, certainly the outreach, the Hudson Christian Community Food Bank here, and then now the backpack program, certainly doing a lot of ministry to make sure that those who are hungry are fed.
Yes, and I know we are all so grateful to St. Pat's for the wonderful space you make available to those important feeding ministries in our community. Because I think that's all the core value that we have, that all would be fed. Pastor John, what about you and Bethel? What's been revealed, and how are you kind of living into those reaffirmed or newly unveiled core values that you have in this time?
Good question, Kendra. Our mission statement is connect, grow, and serve. And just as simple as that is, so many of our people of multiple ages have commented what a challenge that's become to live this out. And yet, I think how they've adapted so well to connect with people. Normally, I think most of us would think, well, when you connect, you hang out with people. Well, there hasn't been all that hanging out going on these last 10 months. But I'm just amazed how people have been connecting with folks in the congregation as well as outside, whether that's through a phone call, an email, a text, a letter, whatever. But I really sense people are connected in a way that they've not been before. I mean, let's face it. I mean, we've got people's attention at this stage of the game. So that connecting's gone well. The growing, we've probably got more people involved with Bible studies and book studies now than we normally do during healthy times. And again, we've got a captive audience, but people are jumping in, and that's been exciting to see. And serving, I mean, that was really one of the very first things going back to March or April, whenever the initial lockdown was, people calling saying, what can I do to help? What can I do to help? How can I reach out to people? So I think it's happening at Bethel. I think it's probably happening at all of our churches as people have adapted to, in creative and, using some ingenuity to just make the Christian faith come alive as we reach out to people. So, again, nobody would choose this crisis that we're going through. But I would be one of the first to say there's some really good things that have come out of it, even in the midst of this chaos and this pain and suffering.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great segue into my next question. What are some of the good things that you want to hold on to? I know for our parish, we've been able to include people in worship that were previously homebound because we're all worshiping from home. And so that's one thing we definitely want to hold on to that wouldn't have happened without this time of new imaginings. So Don, what's perhaps one thing at Hudson United Methodist that has started during this time that you hope will continue indefinitely?
Well, that's an easy question to answer because we confronted the fact that for technical reasons, a live stream in our sanctuary doesn't work. So we were thinking about a podcast. We did that pivot, and now that podcast worship service, it's not just the homebound. As you said, so many of us are homebound now. It's also the snowbirds, because they can come to church with their home church no matter where they are in their travels. And it's a good ministry for the families instead of the struggle sometimes youth family can have to get to worship in a sanctuary. Now you can have brunch and worship, and it's a much softer start time because of the new technology. So we're definitely going to hold on to podcast worship.
Great. And Father John, what about you and St. Pat's?
Yes. Like everyone else, certainly the live streaming, and as Pastor Don said, making church available to those who are homebound. We always had them, we always will have them, and now we just are able to minister to them so much more effectively. I think one of the things, though, too, is this is a time for evangelization, for some growth, as Pastor John said. People who might have felt nervous about coming into church, I haven't been there for a while or haven't been there before. I don't know how, what door do I go into? What are people going to welcome me? Am I going to know when to sit or stand? Where they can start out by joining us on a video or a live stream and get sort of pulled in, that hopefully that at some point will translate to them being comfortable to walk into our door. And this might be a kind of one thing that I've kind of noticed, kind of an odd thing, but we sort of joke about it a lot, is that we have many of our people who tend to sit in the same seat every Sunday, and are very comfortable there. And because for those who do come in person, every other pew is closed off now, and people have changed what time they might come to service. And so maybe somebody's sitting in their pew. People have had to move where they sit in church. And that's something I hope that it continues, that because you get a whole different perspective. The sound might be a little different, but you see different people as well, and greet different people. So that's actually something I hope will continue, is that we'll be willing to mix it up a little bit when we look for where we're going to sit at church.
That's a great point, and maybe speaks to the hope of new vision that we've all gotten and new perspectives, and hopefully we will carry those forward. Mm-hmm. John, what about you and Bethel? What's one thing you hope to continue indefinitely that has begun during this time?
I've mentioned some of the technology, along or beyond live streaming, which I think is great. And I would just mention too, the other thing that we have not named is, live streaming is not just in real time, but then most of our live streaming stays on there. So you can tune into a service really at any given time, which, here, there, and everywhere. I mean, I think that's a great addition to, as we've said, just outreach and evangelism. But the other thing too, fairly obviously, is just the whole Zoom content, connection. And I think that's something that we certainly will continue to do. And we've got a staff of 18, 19 people, and they really come from all over the River Valley. And sometimes I think we're more productive doing Zoom calls than we are meeting in person. I also think about just the numbers of people that have signed on with Bible studies and some of the book studies that we've done. And again, as these colleagues have mentioned, I mean, I think we have people now engaged that never were engaged before, and maybe it's a little safer for them. It's easier to kind of make the entry, but even once we're back able to meet under the same roof, I still think that Zoom will continue to be a creative option to engage people in a number of ways. So praise the Lord for technology.
Absolutely. Well, so moving a little bit more to this season of December in the church world, Advent, preparation for the coming of Christ. One of the things we talk often about is hope. And one of my favorite quotes about hope, because we're not talking about sentimental hope, but deeply rooted hope, is from St. Augustine. Hope has two beautiful daughters. Their names are anger and courage. Anger at the way things are, and courage to see that they do not remain the way they are. So as we think about hope, as we think about the transformative event that we all claim as Christians of Christ coming into the world, I wonder if you could each share one way that your community has been living into hope, both seeing those things that God would want us to be angry at, and then having the courage to do something and step forward to help move toward what we all professed God to desire. So, Dawn, can I kick it over to you first? How has the United Methodist Church here in town been living into this deeply rooted hope?
Well, thanks. That's a good first question. I wanted to hear the guys first, but I'll do it. Actually, we were living into hope before the pandemic. And one of the great things, because of the technology, is that our leadership board is continuing to work on some needed building adaptations that will make our building more accessible. Before the pandemic, we were certified as a dementia-friendly congregation. And our neighborhood where we're physically located, we are just surrounded by children as people have moved into these mid-century ramblers. It's kind of fun, but our building didn't reflect the open doors. And so we're working on that. And what we're waiting for with great hope, as soon as the public health professionals tell us we can, is to be able to share our youth space with the Day Away program for the Center for Aging and Disability. And this is a program that allows family caregivers to leave their loved one who is diagnosed with a form of dementia in a safe social setting and be able to do things like make their own doctor appointment, go get their own haircut, just sit and have a cup of coffee and look at the river without having to tend to what's next. And that Day Away program has benefited so many people in our community, and we are all set. All we need is a go-ahead from the county health department. And so that's one of the things we're looking forward to in hope to meet these needs.
Wonderful. We look forward with that for hope. We look forward with hope to that as well. Father John, you and St. Pat's, how are you living into this deeply rooted hope in this time?
One way is that sort of the courage to be able to make some changes that we've always thought about or talked about. So with our programming for our children and middle school students, we've always talked about going to a family-based model. And it was something that we just never really had the courage to do, and talked about, we'll lose some families by going to that model, but it was something we felt pretty strong about. And with then coming into the pandemic and with COVID, it just totally made sense to go to a family-based model where families could really work on learning about our faith at home together. And we really sort of that idea that, if we tried to do kind of our traditional programs, which would have kids come in on a Wednesday night and such, well, our numbers are going to be down anyway. So all of a sudden that really becomes irrelevant, and we don't worry about that. But really looked at more, what is God calling us to do? Who is he calling us to be and to become? And so we had the courage to make a change that we had just always been talking about. And then even bringing in the backpack program on site here. Again, having to let go of something to free up space so that they could then come in. Another just, something that maybe we had talked about, letting go of a ministry, something that maybe had run its course, and time to change. And so I think when I look at hope, that maybe we might have the courage down the road to make the changes that we really discern ought to be made, and might not have that fear of always doing what we've always done, just because we've always done it that way. And so when I relate to hope, it's the idea of maybe some courage as well. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yeah, hopefully this is all training us that we can be more adaptable than perhaps we thought we could be, and more flexible. John, what about you and Bethel? How are you living into this deeply rooted hope?
The things that I think of, Kendra, is Bethel has needed more space for quite some time now. Prior to the coronavirus and the pandemic, I mean, we were in the midst of what really would have been not only a capital campaign, but expansion to our Highlands campus. And needless to say, as the pandemic hit, a lot of things came to a screeching halt. But over these last 5-6 months, so many of our leaders, so many of our people have said, well, we're going to plan ahead, aren't we? I mean, we're not going to let this defeat us. I mean, we're going to be ready to move ahead when this is done. And to me, that's been very encouraging. It's not coming from the top down, it's coming from the ground up. So, these are people of faith that are saying, we know we need to expand our capabilities for evangelism, for outreach, for nurture, for all those things. So, we're not going to let this defeat us. And to me, I mean, a big part of hope is looking ahead and seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. So I've been very encouraged by that. And as I say, it's come from the ground up, not from the top down.
Wonderful. So maybe as our concluding question then, as we look to turn the page on 2020 and look into 2021, many people make resolutions as the new year approaches. I often talk about making intentions, setting intentions, whether they be faith intentions or personal intentions. So let's go there. And as a final word, we'll go to Pastor John first. What is the intention that you hope to set for 2021, given everything that each of us have personally and as a community and as a world have faced? What's that one intention that you hope to live into in the new year?
Kendra, I think for all of us, there's been a new appreciation of fellowship and being together. I mean, I've heard people say, and I bet you have too, I never really realized what a great gift it was to gather as the people of God. And whether that was for worship on a Sunday or for a Bible study or just, being together for a cookout or whatever. So my hope is not only will people really appreciate the gift of togetherness, but I would also link in that connectedness. I mentioned earlier, I mean, part of our mission statement is connecting, growing, and serving. And one of the ways that I've seen people connecting is just with phone calls, emails, whatever. But I feel more connected with a lot of our people since this has began than prior to that. And I think many of our people would say the same thing as well. So my hope is that when we get back to life as normal and all the distractions and all the busyness, that we'll still retain that sense, that need, that gift of being with brothers and sisters and reaching out to them, and not just in the time of tragedies, but I mean also in the times of joy and happiness as well. So I think that has certainly made a lot of the Christian community here, there, and everywhere stronger than it's ever been.
Thank you. And John, what about you and St. Pat's? What's your intention, that one thing you hope to focus on most in the new year?
I think part certainly echoing what John had said. I think as pastors in the community in the last 8-9 months, we've been together and communicated much more than we might typically. And so I've just really have come to even appreciate even more the camaraderie that we share as pastors serving in the greater Hudson community. And so I would hope that that's something that we can continue to grow so that we might better serve not only our specific community, but serve the much broader Hudson community in even a greater way. And just, some of this has been a time where I know personally I've reached out to some friends and things like that I haven't communicated with even in a few years, because all of a sudden it's very convenient. And I would hope to maybe, not let those connections go astray, but build on them and, take them from an electronic communication to hopefully even an in-person connection at some time as well. And so looking to 2021, certainly that would be my intention, and just looking forward to being able to see the people that I haven't seen in a long time in a personal way. And just that's certainly is, I don't know what it's going to take or what's going to signify the day when more and more are going to feel comfortable and feel safe and be safe to come out. But certainly there are people that I have also lost contact with. I know that. And certainly I miss them.
And Don, what about you?
As a pastor, I carry an intention that the ministry for myself and for the church I'm currently serving is that it be complementary and collaborative with other churches. And I think one of the great graces that Hudson has is the Hudson Area Ministerial Association, and our willingness to be as collaborative as we can. Everybody on this screen knows it's not always easy. We have differing positions and theologies, but we're still united in prayer. We are still united in Christ's great command to love our neighbors as we love ourselves, that second step of it. And I call that the theology of the neighbor. And as we push through COVID, as we come out the other side, my hope is that we have shed some of what was holding us back from being the varied members of the body of Christ that we are.
Well, lots of good reflections. Thank you all. Certainly our prayers, I think I can speak for all of us, are with the wider Hudson community, particularly in this time. And just as we've all in different ways named the importance of connection, though it has come very differently this year, I think that that's our prayer during this time for everyone, that there would be a sense of connection, even if it looks very different for all. So my thanks to Don and John and John, and to the River Channel for hosting us. May you all be in peace and good health, and may you have a wonderful holiday season and a very happy new year.
So much.
Thanks so
God
much,
bless.
Kendra. Thank you.
Thank you, Kendra. This was a good experience.